Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Efecs 2020. My name is Charlotte van Velthoven from Charlie Speaks, and it is a great pleasure to guide you through the program both today and tomorrow. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, we do have a lot in store for you. We've got plenary sessions, we have an exhibition with at least 95 exhibitors. There will be project proposal pitches, but also award sessions. A lot in store for you indeed. And ladies and gentlemen, this event could not have been made possible without the tremendous efforts of a couple of organizations. And those are ARTEMIS, AENEAS, EPoSS, but also the Joint Undertaking ECSEL, the European Commission with the kind support of EUREKA, the German Federal Ministry for Education and Research, and also the German Council Presidency. So dear audience, before we really get started, I would like to run you through a couple of practicalities. Well, you're more than welcome to engage with us also via social media, and there we would like to ask you to use the hashtag Efecs 2020. Also, the event will be recorded, and what is very important that I would like to point out to you that although this is a fully digital event, that doesn't mean that you cannot interact with us. On the contrary, we are seeking your very active engagement. So you're more than welcome to use the chat to post any questions that you might have, and I'm very happy to take them on board during the several sessions that we are going to organize today. Because, ladies and gentlemen, one aim of this event is to gather your input. There will be a new agenda for the electronic components and systems industry and for key digital technologies for the future to put Europe in a leading position. So we cannot do it without you. And I can tell you we have more than 800 registered participants. So I'm sure that we will be able to gather your input in a very successful way. Ladies and gentlemen, the title of this event is Digital That Works for People. And I think this is particularly fitting given the health crisis we're facing, but also the economic crisis. And therefore, that is a title I would also like to discuss with two renowned people that I am going to introduce to you right now, because we are discussing a bit the event itself, Efecs, the digital sovereignty, the focus on the ECS and the KDTs. And the two people I would like to introduce to you are Sabine Herlitschka and Jean-Luc Di Paola-Galloni. So Sabine is the CEO and CTO of Infineon Technologies Austria since 2014, but she's already been with the company since 2011. Moreover, since 2020, Ms. Herlitschka is Vice President of the Federation of Austrian Industries and Chairwoman of the Supervisory Board of the University of Applied Sciences, Carinthia. Her professional career includes biotechnology research, international cooperation and financing in research technology and innovation. And until 2011, she headed the European International Programs Department of the Austrian Research Promotion Agency and was responsible for the operational implementation of, for example, the 7th Framework Program for the European Union. And then Mr. Jean-Luc Di Paola-Galloni is Group Corporate Vice President, Sustainable Development and External Affairs at Valeo since 2010. Previously, he was an advisor to the CEO of Gaz de France and has research experience in the field of defense, international relations and strategic affairs. And in 2018, he was also elected as the president of the ARTEMIS Industry Association, the European Association Systems, Industry and Research Actors in the ECSEL Joint Undertaking. I'm sure you all know this organization by now very well. So once again, Sabine, Jean-Luc, I'm very, very happy to have you here. And perhaps I'd like to open up the discussion with you with a first question coming back to that theme of today and tomorrow, technology that works for people, our digital future. So Sabine, may I ask you first to comment on that? What does that slogan mean to you, technology that works for people?
Yes, good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome also from my side. Well, to answer the question in a very pragmatic way, think back 1 year, could we have been able to imagine to hold this Efecs conference fully digitally? I mean, Yeah, we most likely we would have explained ourselves how difficult it is. Uh, um, of course, how much we appreciate the personal exchange, but also in terms of imagination, most probably we could not have imagined to do that in a fully digital format and still being able to exchange. So I think by this example, every one of us feels that particularly now, in the course of the pandemic and the second wave, digitalization has arrived at everyone's life very personally, and even for us in a professional context, and even for us as the electronics components and systems community, we experience how much better we can cope with our means that we have, that we also represent as a community. Most likely we are able to approach many more people in the context of this event, and will be able to accelerate even more the exchange. So yes, technology that works for people and very pragmatically in all areas of our society, and that can be the accelerator then for taking the next big steps forward.
Okay, thank you very much. So digitalization really as an accelerator, you have a broader reach, and indeed people have become even more creative. So in that sense, it is very promising. I'd like to ask you as well, Mr. Di Paola-Galloni, what is your vision on that, technology that works for people?
Yeah, I fully agree. And again, also a very warm welcome from my side and from the private members board of the current ECSEL, and thanks for this invitation. I fully agree with what Sabine just said. I think that the current context is giving us a sense of humbling of what we had to cope with. But on the other hand, I think we are really truly experiencing a very interesting acceleration of what the digital can bring to our lives in terms of solution. And I think that the electronic component and systems community and ecosystem is really showing, first of all, a certain level of resilience. Is showing also, and we need to, I would say, face what are certain limits and certain compromise we need to make. But on the other hand, some very interesting challenges and opportunities that are ahead of us. And if I would say, give a few examples for the people in the overall value chain, and particularly on the application side, which is obviously, as president of ARTEMIS, I would say my most known perimeter. Indeed, you see that in the field, first of all, of health and on detection and on prevention, we have put forward very interesting solution to fight this terrible pandemic, and also to bring some solutions of recovery during, I would say, the whole care system of the patients. On the other hand, if you check also other application in smart living at home for, detection of, many problems to fight against isolation of vulnerable people, we had displayed many solutions on that. And last but not least, look at what is being deployed thanks to the ECS in mobility, in making mobility in cars, in trucks, in buses, much more autonomous, much more digitally advanced. And this is many, many, many thanks to the ECS overall value chain, from the chips, from the simple components up to the systems that are on board.
Okay, thanks a lot. And also for giving some concrete examples where we actually have reaped the benefits now of digitalization within given areas such as health, smart living, but also mobility. But I do have another question, because the pandemic, it is a real pandemic, which means that there is a lot of global competition as well. Are you worried about this global competition? Because, for example, China is making a lot of investments within the ECS business, and Europe now wants to invest additionally as well. But is this enough, or do we need to make more investments to stay ahead of competition? Perhaps, Sabine, you can answer that question.
Yeah, I think the pandemic is as painful as it is, it also helps to focus. The pandemic shows what's really important to us, and it magnifies our weaknesses and potentials. So in the sense of digitalization, as mentioned, this is certainly an acceleration. On the other hand, I think it also demonstrates that, let's say, our digital sovereignty is clearly an issue. All of us, we depend on well-established digital platforms, again, to take a very obvious example. But we don't have too many European platforms of that type. So we generate data that we in Europe, we typically don't take advantage of. So this, again, is an issue which we have to foster, and the pandemic demonstrates that we have to particularly look at those issues. Our key enabling technologies, our sovereignty in technology, but our digital sovereignty in particular, how we deal with data. And yes, global competition is tough in this field. We have noticed that for a long time, and now is really the time to take action. On the one hand, as underlined by the pandemic, but on the other hand, because we have the opportunity to create our new framework at this point. We are we prepare for Horizon Europe. We prepare for the follow-up of ECSEL, the key digital technologies, and now is the time to put our heads together, and have done so already. Now we have the opportunity to shape it. And just to give you a dimension, China has just finalized the discussions on its next 5 years plan. And of course, they put exactly the right topics in the focus. Our key enabling technologies, the electronics sector, microelectronics in particular. These are core areas. China invests some 150 million. It isn't even really important what currency, euros or dollars, a lot of money, for instance, in setting up an own semiconductor industry.
Yeah.
Competition
is making
is tough.
Yeah.
We are at the right point in time to take bold decisions and implement forcefully.
Exactly. And it is an awful lot of money. You're absolutely right there. And what you pointed out as well is that there's a lack of digital platforms that really come from Europe. They come from outside. That's something that we can build up. But, and that's also a question for Mr. Di Paola-Galloni, is, Sabine talked briefly already about Horizon Europe. There will be a push for key digital technologies. But I think we're done with like scratching the surface, right? If we really want to make a difference, we shouldn't fund on the basic level, but really go more into detail. What's your vision on that? What should we fund? What are we looking for?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I listen and I agree with what Sabine just mentioned. And I think that this moment is clearly a wake-up call for our continent. First of all, as I said in my very first point, it's good to be also cautious on what clearly out of this concept of sovereignty, I would personally prefer naming it a sort of digital autonomy that we can fight for our continent, because many of I would say, the users of the ECS value chain are international, have markets also outside of Europe. What is very important is really to robustify, to solidify the value chain that we can have from the very first pillars, from nano micro up to smart systems and embedded and intelligent systems in our continent. So to me, one of the interesting aspects and angles to review the overall ECS ecosystem is to help everybody at each layer of the ecosystem and the value chain of where we are winners. That is to say, to integrate well, and I am doing it personally with Sabine. This is why it's both a very clear credo, is to get this vision with the techno push of what the innovations coming from ECS can bring as a value, what is European inside. This is what we need to fight for in order to, I would say, protect. And we have many examples of innovation where we're still ahead in many, many areas of embedded and intelligent systems, whether it is on applications in health, in mobility, in smart living, in smart manufacturing, where at the end of the day, Europe can still play a role. On the other hand, of course, we also need to play with the right rules. And I think that Europe has a very interesting opportunity to smartly protect. That doesn't mean close, but smartly protect our standards in terms of data protection, of GDPR, and last but not least, the carbon neutrality that goes so much along with the Green Deal. That is to say that we shall not import products in the digital that are not respecting the environmental, I would say, schemes that we want to have for our continent. And this is also through trade that we can protect the ECS ecosystem.
Okay, thanks a lot for this contribution. Very helpful. So we need a kind of integration. We are still ahead in certain areas, so we should keep that position, but still stay true to what Europe values and what its norms are, is to be open, but in a sense also a bit protective, but in the European way with the standards and the GDPR and all these kind of things that we value most. Perhaps another question to Sabine. We had a previous discussion already, and you said, well, these plans are all very nice, but education, I mean, without education, those plans will not take off. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, education is key. Education is key for everything. And in particular, for us in Europe, we have been talking about the knowledge-based society and economy, and education is key for that. How can we differentiate within this global competition, if not through the best ideas, through the most creative innovations successfully placed on the market? And education is key for that. And education in at least two ways. On the one hand, using digitalization, not just to learn and teach with tablets, but to really further develop the content of what we teach to younger people. The enthusiasm for technology, science and technology, for instance. Here, digitalization can present the content in a much more appealing way to come up with, let's say, adequate and timely formats that can really revolutionize the way how we educate people. Well, and then of course the how to involve women in science and technology, and in particular technology. Also here we really have to focus. There was so much that has happened already, but we have to get better here, and education can help in this endeavor. And of course, and I also want to mention that a few weeks ago, the Pact for Skills has been launched. And I think that's also a very good development. Again, putting digital into the focus of this future education initiative where everyone, all actors come together to promote that.
Exactly, and this fits into the story that you both told us, that we see this acceleration of digitalization, so education needs to suitably fit this acceleration process. So thanks for that. Well, unfortunately, we have almost come to the end, and there's a final question I would like to ask to both of you. And I'd like to ask you to pick one of two words which suits you best. I'd start with Jean-Luc. Would you choose European digital sovereignty or a global open approach?
I think I answered to you that I would say a European better digital autonomy, if you allow me to go in between.
Yeah, this is a very creative solution. Thank you very much. Sabine.
I pick one word, which is and. European digital sovereignty and global open approach.
Okay, thank you.
That's another way of putting it.
Good. I would like to thank you so much for your contribution. I really appreciate it. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, the points were very clear. We are facing an acceleration of digitalization, especially in these times, and we should definitely bear the fruit. And for that, we are still very much ahead in a couple of areas. We can step up our efforts in other areas. Funding is needed for that. A lot of cooperation, of course, at the bottom level. Education is key to push forward with these topics.